Either way in life, you're going to suffer. No matter what, you're going to suffer. So the question is, which suffering do you want to endure? I think the suffering of actually knowing your path and pursuing it obsessively is a far better suffering than staying in that quiet desperation of never actually confronting yourself within, getting clarity on your North Star and your true north, and moving on that path, because you'll just be miserable your whole life if you don't.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, host and founder of Mountain Tough, and we are so stoked that you are here. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests week after week, and we love seeing you guys dive into these episodes, breaking down mental toughness, mindset, but specifically from some of the best, most inspiring people on the planet. Thank you for making us one of the top mindset podcasts in the country. We love seeing your rankings and reviews come through, and we love seeing these episodes get out to more people, to transform more lives, and to help people learn how to struggle well and pursue their purpose. If you are a new listener to the Mountain Tough Podcast, I do want to make sure you know that all podcast listeners do get 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. So the Mountain Tough app has all of our physical, mental, spiritual, and nutritional training inside of there. You can download that app from any app store, iOS, Android, Roku, all the smart TV streaming platforms. And as a podcast listener, you can use the code MTNPOD, all caps, all one word. That's Mountain Pod. And that's going to get you 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. So you can go through our training programs before you make a decision to become a subscriber for a full 6 weeks. So they're going to start you on the 14-day free trial and then an additional 30 days on Mountain Tough Plus. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. Transitioning to today's guest. Today I have Akshay Nanavati on the show. Talk about an inspiring human being. He is currently getting ready to do a solo 110-day ski coast-to-coast expedition across Antarctica. We break that down today. We talk about his training, his gear, his setup. This expedition is insane. It hasn't been done before. No one's gone coast to coast in Antarctica. He's been working on this expedition his whole life. It's a cumulative expedition to capstone his life experiences. He's been training specifically for it for 4 years in Alaska, in Iceland, in Vermont, in Minnesota, to get mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared for this expedition. It is insane. It's an episode you're not going to want to miss. After we talk about his expedition details, we do transition to his new book, Fearvana, which is full of golden nuggets that we talk about on this show all the time. How do we rewire our brain to stay positive, to struggle well, to make sure we're on purpose, on mission in our life, to live that virtuous life that we all want? That's what his book is all about. And so we break down those components as well. So stand by for my powerful conversation with Akshay Nanavati. Let's start with that darkness retreat. I'm really curious about that. 10 days in complete blackness all by yourself.
Mm-hmm. It was the second time I did it. First time was for 7 days, second time 10 days. Both times I wanted to add hunger to the experience as well. So I chose to do just a juice fast. So the way it worked is in Mexico, where I did it the second time, there was a kind of a double door little cabinet system. They would open the outer door, put a juice in there, and then close it. And then I open it through inside so that you don't get any exposure to light whatsoever. And I did a 8-day juice fast, so 2 juices a day. And the last 2 days, I did no juices at all, so no calories for the last 2 days, just to add hunger to the experience. And when you're in that extended level of darkness, you start seeing lights. and the
Huh.
lights are as real as any of the lights that I'm seeing here. And everybody experiences their own version of what the lights are in terms of colors, shapes. They take shapes that you can call it whatever you want, depending on your paradigm, whether it's God speaking to you, the subconscious, universe, whatever you want to ascribe that belief to.
Hmm.
But they will take shapes. You'll see lights and in these very intense, deep meditations. And there's obviously nothing to do in there. So you're just sitting still with yourself. And the value of that experience is that you're opening doors into your own soul that have very rarely, if ever, been opened in the level of kind of distraction and decadence we are in normal reality, right? So
Yeah.
when you're opening those doors, though, deep meditation, it's often framed as this just kind of peaceful experience, but it's not, because when you're opening those doors, it's not just the sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns coming out of those doors, right? It's also the demons,
Yeah.
and you have to face whatever arises from from that place within your soul. But by bringing it to the surface, you can now do something about it instead of it running your life. One of my favorite quotes from Carl Jung's that really summarizes the essence of this is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Hmm.
And that's the point. That was what drew me in. The second time I went in purely as training for the 110 days I'll be completely alone in Antarctica. The
Yep.
first time I went in was more kind of healing around some past stuff and just to go deeper within. But second time I was in a great mental space, physical space. It was just mental training for Antarctica.
And there's actual facilities that host these that people can
Yeah,
go
you
to.
you have to have like, because people have asked me, can I just do it at home? You can, I mean, you can, sure, you can lock a room, but you'll still get ambient light. So while you will still get some experience of stillness, you're not going to get the full experience of those hallucinogenic light shows, because the point of a darkness retreat is it is set up so no light can penetrate at all.
Hmm. And they just
So this
have
first time was, sorry, go ahead.
they have sometimes they bring you food, sometimes they bring you liquids, and then they just have like a small bathroom and a bed in there.
Yeah, you can choose if you want to eat food. So I chose to do the juice fast, so that's why I just did two juices a day. But if you want food, they'll bring you food, kind of whatever you want to do. And it's just it was like a bed, a little kind of couch meditation, seating area in the corner, and a bathroom. Nothing fancy, obviously, just a small little room. And then I put a yoga mat in the middle because it's incredibly disorienting, that level of darkness. Like
Yeah.
if you lose kind of mental sense of where you are, I've had moments where I was like, all right, I'm just gonna walk around and see if I can figure it out, and very quickly you forget like which corner of the room you're in.
Jeez.
So there was a yoga mat in the middle of the room as kind of a pacer for my feet to tell where I'm at, and I would pace back and forth on that. It's during some of my what I would call the walking meditations, where I would literally walk out loud and speak into creation. Like one of the things I did before I went into the darkness retreat, the second time for the 10 days, is I went deep into studying method acting.
Hmm.
How do actors become the characters they become for movies? And the great actors like Daniel Day-Lewis, for example, they sleep, they dream, they think, they feel as the character, not as themselves. So when you apply that to the lens of personal growth and mastery, essentially you're taking a skill to become someone you need to be to accomplish the goal you need to accomplish. So I went deep into very obsessively studying method acting about the craft of it, how does it work, and went to the darkness to kind of create this character I need to be in order to ski across Antarctica for 110 days.
Yeah. So you just embody that character.
Exactly. And it was madness. I mean, there were if there was a camera looking at me, it looked like this dude's a psycho, because I'd be talking out loud to myself and sometimes even screaming and saying things that it was almost like the part of the process is you surrender to the character. So there's something speaking through you as opposed to you speaking. And it's a very subtle, but it is a distinction that when you felt it, you will be able to tell the difference versus like me talking now versus just surrendering to whatever is unleashed from within. And I
Hmm.
would say phrases and things that I'd never said before, never spoke before, never thought before, because I was morphing into something, into this thing I needed to be, which in and of itself is quite mad, right? To spend 110 days completely alone in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. I mean, for portions of that journey, I will geographically be the most isolated life form on the entire planet, which is wild to think about.
Yeah. No living creatures up there.
Exactly. Nothing. And so literally completely as alone as you can possibly get.
And how does what you're doing different from kind of listened to podcasts before on Colin O'Brady crossing in 55 days and trying to create that record time. And he had that guy from Britain right on his heels. How is your expedition differ from that one?
So three big ways. He didn't actually cross Antarctica. He traversed the landmass. So if you see a map, it's very clear what he did. His expedition was about 1,450 kilometers minus 2,700 kilometers. So
Hmm.
a true coast to coast crossing for one is, as I said, he didn't. And secondly, his was not unsupported. So half the journey, he used what essentially amounts to a paved highway. Like they run these tracks and it has flags every 400 meters. So you don't have to navigate, you don't ski on the challenging sastrugi, the terrain out there, because it's essentially a paved snow track with flag markers. He did
Hmm.
that for half the journey. I will not be using that. So mine is truly unsupported. And thirdly, the distance he had covered had been covered before, multiple times. Alexander Game, there was Borge Ausland, the first person who did a true crossing of Antarctica, like an actual coast to coast crossing. He when he did it, he spent most of his journey without using what amounts to a small kite. And Colin O'Brady's distance had been covered before. What the distance I'll be covering, 2,700 kilometers, has never been covered before without a kite or dogs. So what I'm looking to do is a true coast to coast crossing without the use of kites or dogs, which has been done before. So Borge Ausland was the first to ski across Antarctica with using a very small makeshift kite.
Hmm.
But back when he did it, like it had never been done before. So it was pioneering, right? Like the style evolutions happen as a result of the deed being done. First, it's just about doing it. And mine is kind of a following in his footsteps. But yeah, Collins was not kind of what he claimed it to be in multiple ways. It
And
was
where
not pioneering.
where will your route? What's your route?
So my route will start at a place called the Filchner Ice Shelf near a place called Berkner Island. We're working on the exact starting point right now, but essentially in that kind of northwest corner of Antarctica, going up a glacier onto the polar plateau to the South Pole, coming down a glacier called the Reedy Glacier, and then ending at the Bay of Whales. The Bay of
Insane.
Whales is where Roald Amundsen landed 110 plus years ago when he first was the first man to reach the South Pole. So it'll be
Insane.
kind of it's a very historic place. Very few people have been there. It's very remote. That flight from Union Glacier to Bay of Whales is like a $200,000 flight. So it's absurdly expensive because of how remote it is to get there. But it will be about 1,700 miles from coast to coast, meaning water to water across Antarctica through the South Pole.
$200,000 flight. That's insane. And are you able to get dropped off that flight really close to where you're going to start the journey?
We are working on that. I hope so because so if you don't actually get dropped off at the coast, you kind of have to you get dropped off and then you have to go to the coast and then come back essentially. So I'm working right now. There's a company called ALE, Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. They're the ones who manage logistics for all adventurers in Antarctica. And so I'm working with them to figure out how to get dropped off right on the coastline on the Filchner Ice Shelf because the Filter and Ice Shelf, the route where I'll be dropped off, essentially nobody's got dropped off before. So we're using a lot of satellite imagery to make sure they can do a safe landing and drop me off. Because obviously we're not going to put anybody in danger, like pilots in danger into that for my drop off, but
Yeah.
to see if we can get a safe drop off right on the coast. Because it also, to make it a true crossing, you have to start on the coastline. And that's what I want to do. So I do want to start on the actual coastline.
Man, that's amazing. A-
Yeah.
And when is the start date? When will you go?
So this October, end October, I'll fly to Chile, in a place called Punta Arenas, and then early November from Chile to a place called Union Glacier in Antarctica, which is ALE's base camp, and then from Union Glacier, they'll drop me off at the start point on the Filchner.
And it's important for listeners to know your whole life has been training you for this expedition
Yeah.
mentally, physically, spiritually, but actual specific mission specific training for this has been around 4 years.
Exactly. Yeah. Like looking back, I mean, since I joined the Marines, in when I was 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, everything has been oriented about pushing the line further and further and further and seeing how far I can go mentally, physically, spiritually. And this is a culmination of that. It's the toughest thing I will have ever done for sure. and it's never been done before to do a true coast to coast crossing without kites or dogs. So I mean, separate from just me doing it, I'm not saying this in sort of any egotistical way, just the feat alone, when
Hmm.
accomplished, will be one of the greatest feats of endurance to pull this off successfully. Because I'll be
Man.
dragging a 400-pound sled for 110 days completely alone, right? So 10 to 12 hours a day, dragging the sled over and over and over again to cover the distance I need. So it has been kind of a culmination of decades of pushing the edge, but directly, as you said, for 4 years, it's been on the radar with constant ups and downs because I was originally supposed to do it last year, even potentially the year before that, but then I got frostbite last year. There was logistical challenges as well as financial challenges to pull this off. And so now this year we're finally have like we're raising money because the overall expedition costs about $750,000.
Mm.
So we're raising money to pull it off. And it's, I mean, it's beyond the physical challenge. It's quite a financial one, of course, as well. So
Yeah.
it's a daunting task ahead to pull this off. But this year, it's all looking good to actually happen this year.
And just in your training alone, you lost the tips of two fingers with frostbite.
I was in Antarctica 2 years ago on another expedition. We actually climbed the Axel Heiberg Glacier, which is the same glacier that Roald Amundsen used when he reached the South Pole 110 years ago. So it's very historic. And I mean, my team and I became one of only 26 human beings to ski up it. So very remote, challenging skiing up with the sled. And right when we got to the top of the glacier on day 17 of the expedition, so we completed the glacier, the goal was to get to the South Pole. I ended up getting frostbite and these two fingers. Well, actually, this one was black and had to be amputated. The left middle finger, it recovered fully, as in was like a normal looking finger again. But once you get frostbite on a finger, you're always more prone to frostbite. So
Oh.
when I was in the Arctic last winter on a series of training expeditions in northern Norway, this left middle finger, the tip of it, would get cold before all my other fingers because it had gotten frostbite.
Hmm.
So I made the call to essentially preemptively just cut off the tip of the finger because I saw it as a liability for a 110-day journey. So
Holy
that in and
smokes.
of itself was a unique challenge because nobody would cut it off. Like doctors were like, we can't ethically cut this off. It's a good finger. And
You're like,
I went to India where my family lives and where I'm originally from, and the same doctor who cut off my right finger because that one was black, so
yeah.
they had to cut it off. It was basically dead. It was black and dead. It was gnarly looking to witness. But I convinced the doctor. Actually, thanks to my mom's support, the thing that finally convinced the doctor was my mom telling him that, look, you need to cut off my son's finger because this journey is more important uh than the tip of a finger.
That is wild. I do want to get into the tactical details a little bit because I'm super interested in that, the specifics of how you're setting this mission up, planning and preparing for it.
Mhm.
Because those details are so fascinating around, I'm assuming 110 days is your best estimate. It could be much longer than that or shorter, depending on how difficult this sled is to move. But then going into it deeper, like what's your ski setup? What's your sled setup? Kind of your clothing setup, and then what are you going to eat out there for 110 days?
Sure, yeah. So the 110-day number, that obviously wasn't just randomly came up with, right? Like that was very well thought out from studying previous expeditions, looking at what's a feasible distance, a feasible time frame to cover this distance. Originally, I was even looking at 90 days, but shorter distance means lighter sled, but it means moving faster and you're pushing the line. I mean, even 110, many consider this to be borderline impossible. Ranulph Fiennes has said it's impossible to do a coast to coast crossing without kites or dogs.
Mm,
So 110 days is I don't have the ability to go longer than that because I'm only carrying 110 days worth of food in my sled.
okay.
So I'm carrying all my food with me. So even one of the reasons why it's so expensive is we're extending the Antarctic season. Normally the Antarctic season for adventurers is 85 days. So they have to extend it just for me. That means you need a skeleton crew in Union Glacier of a pilot, doctor, radio operator, things like that
Yep.
at Union Glacier just for me. So extending that season, and even then, you can only extend it so far before it gets into Antarctic winter, and then
Okay.
everybody has to be out essentially.
Man.
Antarctic summer is unforgiving. You're talking minus 40 degrees at the South Pole, winds like hurricane force winds. Antarctic winter is a different beast, right? It's pitch darkness 24/7, completely. I mean, no human beings even attempted an expedition in winter because of the logistics of being out there in winter. So you have to kind of leave. So 110 days was like as far as I could push the line. and give me that time frame to actually cover the distance that I need to cover to
Got it.
pull off the crossing. Yeah, that's where that number came up with. In terms of skis, I'm using Osnes is a Norwegian company, so I'll have backcountry, cross-country skis. Um, Lightweight ones because I'm taking like millions of steps out there, right? Over 1,700 miles. So lighter skis, they're called a Mountain Racer 48.
Mm-hmm.
That means that's less weight I'm moving per step. And I mean, talking about gear and my sled and weight, you asked about clothes, and I'll get to food here in a second. Every piece of gear is vetted ruthlessly for weight to make sure it is effective. I mean, to the point that I'm cutting tags off clothes. I'm not taking any extra base layers. I will be wearing one base layer bottom and one base layer top the entire 110 days. Needless to
Dang.
say, I'll be pretty stinky at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, everything to the point that like my gloves has been tested. My tent, I've cut the zipper handles off my tent. So that way I'm saving a few more grams. Even my scoop, for example, when coming into diet as well, I have a friend who's a supplement formula designer.
Mm-hmm.
So he made a custom supplement for me for Antarctica that is just a beast of a supplement with I can't even remember off the top of my head, all the things it has in there, but it has like all my micronutrients, all your vitamins, things like that. And even the scoop for the supplement, I got multiple different scoops, weighed them, and found because out there I won't be able to like have a scale to know exactly how many grams of supplement. So what scoop is lightweight, but also can say that, okay, 3 or 4 of these scoops equals the one daily serving I need, or whatever it may be, but still lightweight. So I tested the scoops in terms
Man.
of weight, like saving grams. I'm getting a custom down jacket made so I can shave 250 grams off a down jacket. That makes me quarter of a kilo even lighter. Like every piece of gear, talking about detail, is ruthlessly vetted and then tested. So sometimes part of the reason why this has been so expensive too is you're buying sometimes 5 different pieces of gloves, 5 different pieces of other
Testing.
gear, and then you have to test it. You can't just, and you can't test it in normal conditions because it might feel good wearing it in Arizona, but it's not the same when you're in the field in minus 30 degrees, right?
Yep.
So testing every single piece of gear. I have a tent, and all of it I'm carrying in my sled. Coming to food, which is the heaviest part of the sled, I'll be eating about 6,600 calories a day,
And that's
burning
all
about
powder form? Is that all the powder?
no. So 1/3 of my calories will be coming in, and even this has been modified. I mean, the amount of months have gone into the diet, right? Because this is not
Crucial.
only is it so important to just that's your fuel. How do I get as many calories as possible to be as light as possible?
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to get 6,600 calories to weigh less than 1.1 kilos. And just for frame of reference, that is the lightest I've ever heard of a polar explorer, polar adventure getting that many calories to be that light. Because we
Yep.
went like mad scientific in this to think about how many, obviously getting the macronutrients, so proteins, fats, and carbs, how much of each of those. So I'll be eating 150 grams protein, 300 grams carbs, 550 grams fat. Now, when I start, it'll be a little lower because when you first get out there, you just can't physically consume that many
That's a
calories. And
lot.
every
Yep.
expedition I've been on, you can't finish your whole daily rations. But then by day 7, 8, 9, 10, you're starving, and then you
Yep.
can start devouring everything.
Man.
So I'll start a little lighter and then get heavier. So 1/3 will be drinking calories. The rest I'll be eating freeze-dried food for dinner, mixed with butter powder into it,
Mm.
pre-mixed with butter
For the
powder for
fat.
more calories. On the go, I'm eating nuts and chocolates, a nuts and chocolates concoction. And sort of one of my favorite morale foods is jalapeno chips. Like at the end, so right at the end of the day, when I stop skiing and I set up my tent, I come into tent. Jalapeno chips are just heavenly, man. Like
Oh man.
while I'm boiling snow for water, because I boil snow for water to drink as well as for the meal,
Yep.
I eat the jalapeno chips as your sort of post ski relaxation, and you get that salt in you, and then the snow boils, and I eat dinner, then I sleep, and then even breakfast. I was originally going to have a freeze-dried meal for breakfast, but now we've modified that to drink my calories for breakfast because when you drink your calories, you're also saving energy in terms of digestion because
Mm.
your body uses a ton of calories to digest food. But
Yep.
if you drink your calories, you're not using as many calories to get in those calories, if that makes sense.
Insane.
Yeah, so much work and I'm blessed with just incredibly smart people around me, like my supplement formula designer friend. I have personal trainer friends, nutritionists, polar mentors who guided me, and we are just constantly refining, iterating. Even my last 3 months in Alaska, we were making more modifications to keep improving. Keep where can we make further 1% gains. At this point now, it's just those little gains, but every gain. So for an expedition of this magnitude to pull off, like on previous expeditions, I can take extra weight. It's not the end of the world. But
Yeah.
this one, the sled is so freaking heavy, and I need to cover such a big distance that every little 1% makes a huge difference.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My mountain tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. What does your stove and fuel setup look like, and how much fuel do you have to bring?
So I'll be bringing even fuel. Like, how do I be as efficient with my fuel usage as possible? So originally I was bringing 200 milliliters per day, but I'm cutting that down to 190 to save more weight. And I could theoretically go, I think, a little bit lower too, but then it's a risk because if you run out of fuel, your expedition's over. Then you don't have water essentially, right? That your fuel is your water and which is your lifeline. And so I have an MSR XGK stove. I made a custom made stove board with carbon fiber.
Hmm.
Even that, for example, I got 3 different sizes of carbon fiber to see which one is just strong enough, but still the lightest enough. Because one was too pliable, so it was too not strong enough, but the other ones were unnecessarily heavy and too thick. So we reduced a few grams there. I made a custom carbon fiber stove board where I screwed the stove into it, so it sits in there with the fuel bottle on this MSR XGK stove. So in the vestibule of the tent, I have that with a little lightweight kettle that I boil my snow in, and that's kind of where you
Man.
relax and boil your snow at the end of the day, and also in the mornings. That's kind of the tent ritual is you boil snow, and that is what takes up a lot of time that you can't do much about. I
Yeah.
mean, you could do things like put a heat shield around the stove, but it takes as long as it takes, and that just that's where that eats up time. But during that time, you're trying to get as much other stuff done as possible, but to a certain degree, you can't that's where you can't shave off time, right? You need to boil the snow and it takes however long it takes.
You got to eat, you got to drink.
Exactly.
Did
So
you?
my goal is to get in like 8 hours of sleep, 4 hours of tent time, which means the boiling snow, setting up tent, breaking down tent, anything outside of sleeping and skiing, and then to have a 12-hour window of skiing. Now that is actually very efficient. To have 4 hours of tent time is efficient.
Hmm.
So sometimes, like when you get hammered by storms, now you have to dig out your tent in the morning. That takes up more time, right?
Yeah.
And that's inevitable. It's not a matter of when, it's not a matter if, it's a matter of when those storms hit. So some days if I'm, let's say, covering distances way better than I thought, and I'm moving in 10 hours and I'm like way ahead of time, awesome, cool. But I'm estimating 10 to 12 hours of skiing. And if I'm, let's say, not making it, the only place I can sacrifice that cut time is sleep,
Yeah.
which is less than ideal because you need that for recovery. But towards the end of, like at the start of the journey, I don't almost certainly won't be able to cover the distance I need to cover in terms of the daily average, which is about 15 to 16 miles per day.
Okay.
Lead so heavy, and sometimes you can get soft snow on the ice shelf. But on the second half of the journey after the South Pole, you're going slightly downhill. Like it's not downhill that you can kind of downhill ski. You're still having to fight for each step, but it is still mildly downhill, and your sled's halfway, like lighter, half lighter. So I'll be able to make up days on the back end, hopefully. Now, if
Man.
I can move, that was a big reason why I trained Alaska. I mean, I got to a point in Alaska that I was dragging a 560 pound sled, which is way heavier than what I'll need in Antarctica, just so I could get out there and suffer, right? Like
Yeah.
if I suffer harder in training, I'm better prepared for the battle kind of thing. Same thing I'll do in Iceland. I'm taking two sleds to Iceland and I'm gonna load it up with bags of snow to just suffer for hours so that when I get to my sled in Antarctica, I'm like, oh, this
Feels
feels
light.
light. And if I can cover even from the get-go, I can cover my daily average, that would be game changing.
Man. And I
Yeah.
imagine I imagine your ski setup and your tent setup are kind of life and death. Like you got to trust your tent. If you have a tent malfunction out there, you're in big trouble. And then like if you blow a binding or something, you're kind of
Yeah.
stuck out there.
I will be carrying an extra pair of skis. So some gear, again, every piece of gear is weight. You have to consider the weight versus the rewards of it. Um, like two couple of pieces of gear that I will have redundancies in the stove because again, such a vital piece of equipment. I will have two pairs of skis, and this is where different polar explorers have suggested different things, but I think it's worth it. So I'm carrying an extra pair of skis for that reason that if something goes wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
also it allows me the flexibility to switch between half skins and full skins, which if you're not familiar, skins are the things you attach to the bottom of your skis to give you grip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, full skins means no glide, all grip, which sometimes you need when you're going up a hill or something. But no glide means we're fighting harder and it's no glide at all. So ideally you want to be on half skins as much as possible. But for portions of the journey, you'll kind of have to be on full skins because it's not even about how strong you are. It's about if you're going uphill with a heavy sled, you're just going to keep sliding. You're going to keep sliding down.
Yep.
So you put skins. So that's why I'll have two pairs of skis with different skins that I can switch if need be on certain kinds of terrain, as well as if in case something goes wrong with one ski.
What does your tent setup look like?
It's called the Hilleberg. I believe it's a German company. Yeah, there's two real companies, two companies that make bomber polar tents,
Mm-hmm.
Hilleberg and Hellsport. And it's a Hilleberg Namach 2. That's the
Okay.
name of the tent, and very small solo, obviously, because I'm not looking for big, so weight saving again. So
Yep.
pretty small tent, cutting off the zips, cutting off mosquito netting, and even like every zip when you're in Antarctica in the cold, you have to be able to operate with mittens on.
Mm-hmm.
So you tie a string around it so you can have more kind of, a thing to grip. But to save more weight, I cut the handle and tied the string directly to the zip. And that way you just save more weight by cutting off zip handles. So I've kind of modified the tent to make it even lighter as well.
Man, that's crazy. And you'll have a support team there just keeping an eye on you. Are they able to track you via like GPS, satellite phones?
Yeah, I will have a sat phone sort of as a worst case scenario, and also to check in with ALE, who will be at Union Glacier, and then also there'll be a live tracker, and the live tracker even people back home. So even anybody in the normal world, my family, anybody can kind of follow along. And as I'm moving my way across Antarctica, every from time to time, I'll check in with audio updates and just let people know how the journey's progressing, how that day was. I'll have kind of the ups and downs, the roller coaster of some will be the hardest days I've ever experienced, and some will be the most beautiful days I've ever experienced.
Man,
So sharing that journey as I'm making my way across the ice.
when you think about it coming up, what do you think is going to be the most challenging part?
I'm personally not as worried about the solitude. I'm actually really looking forward to that level of solitude because that
Mm-hmm.
level of silence, that isolation, it allows you to tap into what I would call God in a way that you can't in the normal world.
Hmm.
And so I'm excited about it. Well, now, don't get me wrong, there will be some moments that are very lonely. I've experienced this in smaller forms in previous expeditions, but the solitude is profoundly beautiful, and it's a real privilege to get that. So that I'm not as nervous about. For me, the biggest thing is just, can I cover the distance I need to cover every single day, you know? Like, I'm going out there, obviously. I mean, I've committed so much of my life to this. I've spent already over $500,000 on previous expeditions, on gear, things like that over the years.
Hmm.
My life, my soul is into this. My wife now is I mean, our world is just this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I put so much of my soul into this that God knows I want to pull it off. And then there's always that fear of like, will I be able to cover the distance I need in the time frame? You know, last season and the season before that, there were three expeditions that attempted a partial crossing of sorry, four in the last two seasons who attempted a partial crossing of Antarctica, not even a full coast to coast. All three failed. Not a single one could cover the distance they needed
Man.
in the time frame allotted. So that's my biggest fear, is just, can I endure? Can I
Yeah.
pull this off? Can I cover the distance? And to a certain degree, there's an element of, are you strong enough? Then the other element is luck. If you just get hammered by soft snow every single day, I mean, you're in a world of hurt, you know. Pulling 400 pounds in soft snow it's absurdly hard.
Yeah.
I've done it. And when I was in Alaska, we had some days of soft snow. And the difference between soft snow and hard snow, I mean, it's hard to even express, you know?
Yeah.
So you hope for the best conditions, but you get what you get. And whatever you get, you have to endure and you have to fight. Like, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest fear. There's two sections of the journey where I'll deal with crevasses. Thankfully, and that's like kind of horrifying too, the a prospect of being solo on a crevasse. But we are on a crevassed area, but we are mitigating those risks as much as possible. My friend, and a polar mentor guide of mine, he has been up the glacier, been up the two glaciers I'll need to be on. He's the actually one of only three people to have been up both glaciers. So he's kind of providing me a lot of intel on the routes and GPS waypoints to mitigate those risks and navigate it as safely as possible. You obviously can't eliminate risk when you're at something like this, but you do all you can to mitigate that.
Man, that's insane.
It's rather, it's
Those
pretty
f-
wild.
those four trips that failed last year, do you think was it physical or was it weather?
You know, every season, and I'm not saying these particular adventurers did this, but every season there'll be some adventurers saying this was the worst season in Antarctica. And it's like, I mean, I look, Antarctica, here's the thing is Antarctica is savage. It's
Yeah.
unforgiving. Every year it's going to be hard. So I'm not going to play that game of this was the worst season ever. You know, every season somebody's saying that, but I don't think that's inherently true. Antarctica it's just hard. There's no easy days in Antarctica. There's only less hard days, you know? So I
Hmm.
think part of it was just the sheer nature of, and not to take away from any of these four trips, because anybody who spends that long in Antarctica solo, or well, actually, I think three of the trips were solo. One was a team trip in attempting these partial crossings. And they just like, one had to be evacuated early. The other, the other ones, yeah, one just couldn't make the distance. Two of them stopped at the South Pole. So because they weren't making the distance they needed in the time frame covered. So I think it was just a matter of like, yeah, you know, as far as the guy who got evacuated, there was, I think, some sort of medical thing that he had to leave within 30 days. I don't know all the details of what happened. The other ones, you know, improving as skiing as efficiently as possible, for example. That's why I got lighter skis. That's why I practiced just skiing, you know, and
Hmm.
being able to put in bigger days with a heavier sled. That's why I went out with a very heavy sled. So I think part of it was there, you know, not to take away, because this is not this like, it's a very daunting feat to even pull off a partial crossing,
Yep.
let alone a full one. I think it's just the nature of the beast that they just couldn't cover the distance they need to cover.
Got it.
And I don't know how it's going to play out for me. I do believe, like, if you can put in 12-hour days consistently, I think it I think that will be able to do the task.
Hmm.
But that's easy. That's far easier said than done.
Yeah. With that sled
Let
weight.
alone for the fact of you're just putting in 12 hours of grind. I also mean is, if tent time takes a little bit longer, then you're sacrificing sleep, right? So will tent time be as moving as efficiently as possible? If you're getting hammered by storms, that takes longer. So things like that. I just think it's just a very hard thing to cover that distance, and it's also like Antarctica and like polar travel is also a lot more. It's a lot more suffering than what often gets compared to, which is mountaineering. Like every time I hear this, people compare it to sort of Everest or something. Now, mountaineering is much more dangerous because you can actually fall off the mountain,
Yep.
but it's far less suffering, far
Mm-hmm.
less. In mountaineering, as you go up and down the mountain, the day is different, right? It's dynamic. Every day, the views are different. The
Yep.
nature of the terrain is different. You take rest days to acclimatize when you're doing big mountains. And even like, for example, when I was in Denali, in Alaska, at the 16,000 feet, you're in a thin ridge line, 1,000 foot drop on each side of you. When you're in a terrain like that, the environment makes you kind of go into flow. So you're not thinking about the views, you're not thinking about things. You're right there in front of you because of the
Yep.
danger. In polar travel, most of the journey, there's nothing dynamic. Every day is flat white nothingness. That's all you are seeing. So it's mind numbing mentally,
Man.
right?
Yeah.
Mind numbing. You're doing the same damn thing that's not dynamic at all. It's just picking up the sled, dragging it every day.
Yep.
No, I won't be able to take rest days. So no rest days to do anything. It just shows just the sheer monotony and mental grind of it to do that for hours and hours and hours. Like I have friends who've climbed Everest and K2 and done polar expeditions in Antarctica, and they too will say, and I've done both as well, not Everest, but I've done a lot of mountaineering and polar travel, and like anyone will tell you, far more suffering, but not as dangerous.
Yeah. Just that mental grind of everything being the same, freezing
Exactly.
cold, wind,
Exactly.
no living creatures, scenery's
And
all
just
the
that
same.
that white nothingness, like it's the lack of any stimuli to engage you. It's mentally like it's a mind fuck. It's a real mind fuck.
Man. What has your physical training been outside of the sled? I know you did Alaska and you're headed to Iceland.
Mhm.
So you're doing a lot of real world training, testing that gear and your fitness. But are you doing other gym based training?
When I'm in snow conditions, no. I mean, I did a few strength days in Alaska, but for the most part, just doing the sled work.
Okay.
And it's plenty of strength training as well. You'll feel, I mean, I was basically mildly worked for the entire 3 months in Alaska. But when I'm in Arizona where I live, my primary form of training is tire dragging. So I have a very heavy truck tire, sometimes two, that I go out to parks. So truck tire dragging, hiking, and then I do some strength training as well when I'm at home.
And how much
Uh,
do you weigh?
right now I'm 170. I want to get to 180 before Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually heavy for me. Like I have a little bit of a belly going because I consciously need to be fat because
Yeah.
of how much, like I will burn about 8 to 10,000 calories a day and eating 6,600 at the high end. So I will lose weight out there. Every polar expedition you lose weight. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hard not to, especially one of this magnitude. So I'm working on putting on fat so I have weight to lose.
Yeah. You want to go in a little
It's a
fat.
really it's polar travel. It's a really unique beast training for it. It's the only sport that I know of that where you have to train endurance because you need to do the long hours. You need to train strength to pull that sled, and you need to do all this while you're fat. And as you know, man, none of those three things go together, right?
No. Yeah.
You need all three of those things at the same time. It's a really weird thing to train for.
And that fat keeps you warmer out there too. When you're lean, you're
It
just
does.
freezing all
Yeah.
the time.
Exactly. And once you lose it, and I haven't, but I have some friends who've done the big trips, and I mean, I lost when I did Greenland. I did a month crossing of Greenland. I put on 17 pounds of fat and lost 20 pounds. But I've seen some polar friends of mine that came back, and my God, man, they were like, they were a stick after
Yeah.
a 60, 70 day trip. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna lose, I think, a fair bit of weight on the big trip.
Man, that's amazing. It's incredible. It's
Thank you.
incredible that you're putting all that together. And I do want to transition and back up to how you got to this point in your life because it's a really interesting journey of probably 20 years of digging into the science of mindset tools, fear, anxiety, stress, and leaning into those rather than running away from those emotions and feelings. And all that has created this capstone expedition where you're going to really have to not only lean on that physical training, but certainly the mental side of this expedition is going to trump the physical side, I assume.
100%. Yeah. So my journey that led me to here, as I mentioned, when I joined the Marines, that was the birth of everything I am today. Before this, I was born in India, grew up in India, Singapore, moved to Austin, Texas at 13, and had good parents. They weren't extremely wealthy, but certainly not poor, kind of a middle class upbringing. I
Hmm.
didn't really know any struggle or suffering. When I moved to Austin, I was a very lost young kid, having moved to three different countries, four cities at a young age. So I got into a group of friends, and I take responsibility now. But as a young kid, you're very impressionable, and so I got into drugs, alcohol, very, very heavily. Lost two friends to addiction,
Hmm.
going down that path. I mean, I used to cut myself, burn myself. I would have easily OD'd, as some of my friends did. Kind of, I was the same person I am now, but except drugs was my expression, right? So I was
Yeah.
pushing the line on drugs and going hard as possible. And thankfully, I got out when I saw the movie Black Hawk Down. You've seen that?
Yeah, it's so awesome that movie had enough of an emotional tug on you, like because
Dude,
that
it
is
changed my
it's a phenomenal movie and a phenomenal story, and
life.
like every time you watch that, it makes you tear up and want to join the military, and it's so interesting that it was that strong of an impact that you actually went and enlisted.
It changed my life, man. I still remember that night. It was actually a few of us were about to get fucked up that night. And one friend wanted to go see the movie. Nobody would go with him. So I was like, all right, I'll go with you. And yeah, like you said, tearing up in the movie, specifically that scene when Gary Gordon and Randy Sugar, the two Delta snipers,
Yeah,
volunteered to go on the ground
put me
to protect
down.
Michael Durant, and they died
Yeah.
doing what they died protecting that man. And just that courage to do what they did, man. I mean, and watching that, like after I dropped my friend off that night, he had the book Black Hawk Down. I read the book Black Hawk Down and then devoured every book I could find on military and combat. And so that planted the seed that then got me off drugs, decided to join the military. And it took me a year and a half to get in because I have a blood disorder that transports about 25% less oxygen through my body.
Hmm.
So it was disqualifying. And two
Jeez.
doctors told me it would kill me in boot camp, two hematologists. So I have flat feet, I have scoliosis. All of these things were disqualifying, but this was a post 9/11 world. So
Yeah.
here's a kid who wants to go Marine Corps infantry. We'll find a way for you to go. You know what I mean? So, uh,
We'll pull some strings. I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast.
I did get in. Took a year and a half, but I got in. And then after joining the Marines, that's where I learned the value of doing hard things, of learning how to suffer, not just for your own personal growth, but for someone else. In the
Mm-hmm.
Marines, it's about the men, it's about the mission. It's not about your well-being. It's about the good of the group that trumps your personal individual well-being. And while, of course, every Marine will tell you they hate moments of it, it really sucks, but it is profoundly beautiful to live in that world, to experience that. And that shaped everything I am today. It's the thing I'm most proud of stuff in my life, to serve in that institution, to be a part of that tribe of warriors, the history of that, the brotherhood of that. And it got me into then outdoor sports and finding other ways to challenge myself. And I mean, before this, I was terrified as a young kid, like scared of heights, scared of open water. I remember snorkeling once and seeing the reef drop off into nothingness in the ocean, and I was too scared, so I turned around. So
Hmm.
now, after joining the Marines, I wanted to confront all of those fears. So nature became my playground to do that. I went mountain climbing, skydiving, ice climbing, rock climbing, caving, cave diving, kind of you name it,
Yeah, pushing the
all of
boundaries.
it. Exactly. Started kind of pushing the edges, pushing my limits, exploring that, and being terrified in all of it, far from fearless, but being terrified. I mean, I remember once going skydiving and I was driving to the drop zone, hoping it would rain so I didn't have to do it because I was that scared. But it didn't rain and I did it.
Yeah.
So confronting my fears and doing it. And then in 2007, I was deployed to Iraq, infantry marine. One of my jobs out there was to walk in front of our vehicle convoys looking for IEDs for bombs before they could be used to kill me and my brothers.
Yep.
So dangerous job, but once again, learn how to master fear, learn how to do it for something else, for someone else.
Hmm.
Separate from all the politics of the war, we genuinely wanted to help on the ground. We would try to help these people who had endured so much hell,
Yep.
serving for each other, and trying to do good for humanity out there, separate from all the politics on the big end. On the ground, there was good things happening we were trying to do. Um, Came back, really struggled, lost a friend to the war, lost a few junior Marines to suicide, struggled a lot with survivor's guilt, depression, felt I was diagnosed with PTSD, and then started drinking heavily. I mean, I was at a point in my life downing a full bottle of vodka a day for days
Jeez.
on end, like binge drinking just nonstop, until
After
I
you
would
got
be
home.
throwing up and then I would sober up and then do it again and fall back into the pit. This cycle would just repeat until one morning I was on this, like after 5 days of binge drinking, I was about to just pick up, like walked over to my kitchen and was about to pick up a knife and cut my wrists. And that moment was the rock bottom moment that began the climb out of the abyss. I started researching neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, getting a deeper understanding of trauma, of how do we as human beings navigate suffering? Because we all endure it.
Mm.
And we demonize it. We think of suffering as bad, fear is bad, stress is bad, anxiety is bad, and reframing my whole relationship to these things. And that's what then got me not only personally out of the darkness that I was in, it led to my work in writing the book Fearvana and helping other people combat their own fears and their own suffering. And the fundamental ethos through which I operate from, through which Fearvana is, and now everything I do, is that these forces are not the enemy, that we label them as quote unquote negative emotions or negative things, but there are no bad emotions, there's no bad experiences.
They're
There's
just.
only experiences and there's only emotions.
Hmm.
And what we do with them shapes how we relate to them, right? So, for example, I had struggled with survivor's guilt. Everybody told me, therapists, friends, family, and it all came from a place of love. I get it, not to feel guilty. Rationally, I get it. You can't control what happens in war. When I was out there, my vehicle drove over an active IED, we found out later, that didn't explode. Why the hell that didn't explode? I don't know, man. My
Hmm.
friend's vehicle drove over a bomb, it exploded, he died.
Crazy.
Luck of the draw. Luck
Yeah.
of the draw. And you struggle with that, and everybody's like, it's not your fault, and I get it. Rationally, I get it, but emotionally, it didn't change the fact that the guilt was still there. And instead of demonizing it, instead of saying this guilt is bad, just reframing it, saying guilt is a very normal human experience, a normal human emotion, that actually that guilt is an expression of love. It was an expression of love for my brother.
Hmm.
And so for a long time, what I did was I put a picture of my friend up on my wall and it said, this should have been you. Earn this life.
Yeah.
And that became the fuel to sober up, to stop wasting my life being a fuck up. That
Yeah.
doesn't honor my friend. It doesn't honor life to waste it. So that my guilt became my ally instead of demonizing it. And so that's kind of that was what allowed me to help personally and then help others reframe their relationship to suffering and to any quote unquote negative emotion so we can use it as something good.
Yeah. It's like if he came back and sat right next to you, what would he want to see you doing? Would he want to see
Mhm.
you, just sitting there drinking, or would he want to see you doing what you're doing now? And
Exactly.
that's like really powerful fuel.
And then when you live, like one of my favorite books is this book called "Why Bad Things Happen to Good People" by Harold Kushner. And then there's one line in that book that just touched my soul, among many others. But he said, "The dead depend on us for their redemption and their immortality."
Hmm.
What we do with our life for the ones we've lost, we either honor them or dishonor them. Like my friend that I'm talking about, he's immortalized now. His name is Jacob Neal. He is immortalized through my deeds. And I could, if I fuck up my life, I'm not doing him any, I'm not honoring him, honoring the warrior and incredible soul that he was.
Hmm.
So through my deeds, he is forever immortalized, and he has shaped me. And everything I've done since then is a direct result of every life that has interacted with my own to to get me to this point. It is not just my life, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. It's powerful. I do want to step back and unpack a few things. I did want to unpack that rock bottom moment after
Mhm.
coming home, getting out of the Marines. How long did it take for you really to start climbing out of that hole? What did that look like?
I got back from Iraq in '08. Um, in 2009 or 2010, I went to journalism school because actually, when I came back, as I mentioned, I really struggled, and I went to college to finish my undergrad degree. And I could not handle college. People complaining about the stupidest shit compared to having just come back from war.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to go back to war. And then the wars were dying down by then, so there was no opportunity to. So I then went to journalism school to get my master's in journalism so I could go back to war as a combat journalist.
Got it.
I met my now ex-wife, but met my then at the time woman I married, the woman I married, and so I didn't pursue combat journalism. That's not really conducive to a family life, to say the least. So I then kind of did a corporate job for a little bit, and I hit that rock bottom. I think it was around 2013 or 14. So it was many years later.
Okay.
Because first I had school to provide structure, then I was going on like I did an expedition across Greenland back then I was doing these expeditions just to run away. After the war, I didn't want to deal with the normal world. I wanted to go back to a place of intensity.
Numb.
Now I still do it, but I'm not doing it to run away. Like very different level of consciousness that draws me.
Mm.
But back then, that's what I was doing. And then I remember coming back from Greenland. At this point, I had quit my corporate job because I had a corporate job for a year and a half. So when you have that, once again, there's structure provided, right? So when I came back from Greenland, now I had no job, no money to go back on expeditions. I was kind of building my own business, but at the same time, when you're building your own business, as you know, the structure has to come from within. There's no external accountability. So it's very easy if you're not very strong within, which at the time I wasn't, to get lost, right?
Yeah.
So, first it was one day of drinking, then two, then three, because nobody's there. I don't have to hold myself accountable to anybody, right? Like who gives a shit? Sure,
Yep.
I lose some potential business, but nothing else.
Hmm.
So it was after Greenland, I think a year or two after that, that I hit the rock bottom moment. But it was kind of a build up, if that makes sense.
And kind of a roller coaster, like coming back to drinking, going sober for a little bit, coming back and up and down.
Because yeah, I would sometimes it'd be just a weekend, Friday, Saturday, and then it'd be like, all right, this is stupid, and then I'd stop. Because even between these drinking binges, I was still doing a lot of hard things. Like I would still run ultra marathons. Needless to say, I wasn't the fastest in the world because when you're drinking a stupid amount, it doesn't contribute to fitness. But like I had the will to push through, So I would still do like run a lot. And I think the only reason I'm not dead with the amount I used to drink was because between the drinking binges, I was at least eating healthy and exercising hard. And that's why I think my body just endured. Like the amount I drank when I drank was absurd, man.
Yeah.
Drank multiple lifetimes worth of alcohol in of short sittings.
Like
Uh,
almost trying to drink yourself to death in a way.
It really was. I mean, it was so because it got to a point, in college I drank and partied and you kind of like that was the thing where we did and never saw it as a problem. But there got to a point when it really got dark, it was I never struggled with social drinking. Like I could be in social settings, everybody drinking, no issues. When for me, my trigger was being alone. And being alone is when I would really, and that's when it wasn't sort of drinking for fun anymore. It was just getting hammered to run the fuck away from anything I had to face within my own mind. And that
Mm.
solitude brings out, as I was talking about the darkness, right? The solitude brings out those demons.
Yeah.
That's what my trigger was. Like I couldn't handle being alone, so I would just get shit faced.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Now you're intentionally going into
Now I'm
dark
going as
rooms
alone
alone.
as a person could be.
How do you reconcile how you got sober and changed your life with the 12-step approach? So like, the 12-step approach that comes to my mind now is, acknowledging that you're an addict and
Mhm,
then acknowledging that there's a higher power,
mhm.
making amends. Was your process similar to that?
And I know I know many people who are the 12 steps has worked wonders. So to each their own ultimately. like I did not go down that road, and I am not personally one who finds value in labeling myself an alcoholic. Like, why would I ascribe that label to my identity? Because the labels we ascribe shape our reality, right?
Mm,
So that is not to say it doesn't work. Again, because people I know who directly have sobered up through the 12 steps. So that's awesome if it works for you. I never went down that road. When I hit that rock bottom moment, I mean, I broke my sobriety a ton after. So, but it was far from a, one aha moment and everything was sunshine rainbows after that.
hmm.
Not the case for me. There are some people I know who, when they made the call, they stopped drinking. My now wife, same thing. She's been sober 6 years. She made a call to stop drinking and never went back. Mine wasn't as smooth. It just was nature of the
Yeah.
beast. Because I like even my ex-wife I mentioned without going too deep into the weeds of that, she got caught up in a cult. It was a crazy story. After eight and a half years of marriage, she got caught up in a cult. Our marriage ended, divorced, and then I broke my sobriety again and went into the pit. Same thing, drinking stupid amount, sobered up once again. Now all good, but for me, it was just a matter of like understanding like like that's why I studied neuroscience, then reframe my relationship to my own stuff, my own demons, and then doing that inner work. Because addiction is a band-aid for something you're not confronting within.
Mm,
As one, I think was a great TED talk. I can't remember the guy's name, but he says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
yeah.
So getting that connection to self, connection to God, connection to friends, to family, to people. And now I've been obviously been able to hold that, but it was a rocky road for me. And I think it just began though with starting to being willing to do the inner work
Hmm.
to find those answers and to be able to deal with the demons as opposed to running away from them
Yeah.
and then finding meaning in them.
Well, it's so cool looking at life backwards and how, that struggle made you who you are, led you to the research you did, led you
Yeah,
to the book that you wrote, led you to the expeditions that you're doing now. Like struggle is necessary. It's a
absolutely.
necessary part of life. And the worst things we've been through can teach us some of the most valuable things we need to know. And
Absolutely.
99% of the time, the worst things we've been through allow us to help other people get through them. And,
Exactly.
looking at 20 or 30 years in the rearview mirror is so helpful with that.
Hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to speak the way I do now, having not having gone through that, endured that. It
Hmm.
allowed me, to your point, to help a lot more people battling that because I'm not speaking from reading a book, few books about it. I'm speaking from having lived it,
Yeah.
and that changes the way you speak about it, as you know. And so it's easier said than done when looking back on it, but to say, hey, I'm grateful for all of it. I think sometimes when you're in it, it's very hard, but it's harder. But now it's shaped a mentality that when I am in struggle, whether it's one I'm seeking or one that life throws my way, I often say, thank you, God, for this opportunity,
Hmm.
knowing that there's an opportunity, especially when I'm out there, like granted, when I'm going to Antarctica, like it's a suffering I'm seeking, so it's in that sense is very different than one forced upon you, like if I'm born in war or something.
Hmm.
And I'm very grateful for that. Like I'm not unaware that I get to choose my suffering. That is a luxury and a privilege that many in the world do not have.
For
And
sure.
I've seen those corners of the world from being in war. I've also worked with survivors of sex trafficking and poverty. I've been to post-conflict zones where I've worked with former child soldiers, and you see people in hell on earth, right? And forced into it, thrust into it.
Mm.
But even then, like one of the things I would work with them to show them and reframe is that you're not a victim. Because you've endured this doesn't mean you're like these young girls, for example, who were survivors of sex trafficking, they're told by the world that now they're a victim. But the thing is, look, nobody would wish what they've gone through for anybody. It's like the most horrific shit ever.
Yep.
But they've endured so much darkness means they have greater access to the light. And simply allowing them to see that, to reframe it, now you see you're stronger because of it, right? And so to your point, like reframing that darkness, and when we're in it, saying that now for anybody listening, if you're going through some hell, it's there's an opportunity here that you may not see right now, but it will be. And if you choose to view it as an opportunity, the gift is you'll be able to move through that struggle easier, quicker, with greater tools, with greater mental strength to rise above it, to move on to that next challenge. And look, you're always going to have challenges. I always like to say that progress is not the elimination of problems. Progress is the creation of new problems.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether you have $0 or $1 billion, people are going to have problems. We see celebrities with everything we seemingly think we want taking their own lives, right?
Yep.
Why? Because, so we're always going to struggle. The distinction is to see that, okay, can I up level my struggle to a new struggle? And that journey is is the journey of life. And of course, on this, there's joy and rewards and all of that as well. But it's in the struggle that we hit our new awakenings, hit our new learnings, hit our new opportunities. And so reframing the relationship to suffering, to struggle, to fear, to pain is really the essence of Fearvana and everything I do now. And the expression of that at its culmination is this crossing of Antarctica.
A virtuous life is living in a way where you're learning how to struggle well,
Hmm.
not panicking under struggle or
Hmm.
certainly the last thing you want to do is accept that victim label, because if
Hmm.
you accept that, then you're going to stay there and remain a victim the rest of your life.
Exactly.
But knowing that knowing that struggles are going to come no matter who we are and where we're at and what resources in abundance we have at our fingertips, we're all going to go through struggle, and
Hmm.
preparing ourselves to struggle well is one of the virtues we should be pursuing that very few people in the world are talking about. And no one is teaching us that in society, school systems, almost anywhere. And so then when you're not brought up that way, when you encounter a struggle, you feel like your world is falling apart, when really it's the way it was designed. Adversity teaches us everything about ourselves. So if you had an adversity free life, you would not have any purpose or joy or happiness either.
Absolutely. You can't have a summit without a valley, you know? I
Mhm.
remember when I came out of the darkness retreat and the first time and I saw the light. And I first came out, after 7 days in darkness. This was the first time, and I'd never seen the light look that bright. It was blindingly bright, like beautiful. I mean, awe-inspiring. Seeing the luminosity of the light that way, moved to tears. And I just remember thinking, I felt this deep sense of gratitude for every bit of suffering I've ever experienced, because in a very visceral way, I fully came to comprehend that you cannot really know the power of the light unless you've first been in the dark.
Mm-mm. Yeah, you have to have one to have the other.
Exactly.
We can't have. I mean, if it was always sunshine and rainbows, there would be very little or no meaning in life.
Absolutely, brother. It's and then and it's not to take away from the beauty of those experiences, but it's the roller coaster that, like, you need contrast to give life flavor.
Hmm.
The reason I appreciate a hot shower is because it sucks when it's cold,
Yeah.
or I appreciate the cold. Like, you have that contrast. Even coming back from boot camp, sitting on a couch, heavenly.
Mm.
Now, when I come back from expedition, sleeping in a bed, a
Yep.
warm shower, even like now, looking at a night sky, because in Antarctica there's no night. So it'll be 24 hours daylight. So I don't get sunrises and sunsets, which are some of my most favorite times a day. But because you have contrast, it makes everything in life that much more flavorful. Even the suck. Like, I'm grateful for the comfort, but I'm grateful for the suck because I know how strong that makes me, right? So you need contrast to feel more awe, to feel more life. That's what makes life worth it, to actually come alive. And most people, as Henry Thoreau said, most men, and I would argue most people, live lives of quiet desperation.
Yep.
And I think one of the big reasons for that is we're so scared to leap for the fear of the fall. I don't want to get hurt. So I don't actually, like, I don't go out there, But if you don't, you're going to fall if you leap. But you also will experience more summits,
Hmm.
more highs. You have to be willing to dive into the depths of the abyss if you want to experience the heights of awe.
I know. Yeah. Talk about like looking at life in the rearview mirror. The best things in life always were things that scared the living crap out of us at the time,
Absolutely, brother.
but we decided to take that step anyways, and they turned out to be the biggest, most impactful things of our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the big things like crossing Antarctica, dude. My now wife, like, going on a date with her, the first and second date that I had genuine anxiety, like butterflies in my stomach. I was more scared going on that date with her than I was doing most of the crazy shit I do, and and yet clearly it was such a reward, so rewarding, like the best thing ever to actually step into that fear. Now we're married. We couldn't have a better marriage. We've been together 9 months now, and it's perfect. So, but you had to step into that fear. So it's
Hmm.
not even just about like crossing Antarctica. It's all those things you have to step into, and you get the rewards on the other side of that.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. I do want to talk about the book just a little bit more, Fearvana, from the lens of how do we improve? How do listeners improve? How do they start taking steps to see improvement in their life? And also from the perspective of these neural pathways in our brain because of decisions we've made and thoughts that we've had since we were born. We have these pathways where naturally we're gonna think negative, or we're gonna feel like we're a victim, or we're going to judge, or we're going to get anger or bitter or resentment. How do we start rebuilding our brain?
Mm-hmm. So the first step in that, and even the first section of the book, is titled Awareness and Acceptance. So the first step is becoming aware of the natural mechanisms that the way our brain works, so you don't demonize them and you understand them, and then you can rise above them. So for example, you mentioned how our brain focuses on the negative. It's a cognitive bias called the negativity bias. It is more functionally valuable, evolutionary valuable, to focus on danger versus the beautiful thing. Like evolutionary speaking, if I don't pay attention to the saber-toothed tiger or the lion around the corner, I'm dead. If I miss a beautiful sunset, no big deal. I'll still see it the next day, right?
Yep.
So we're more wired to focus on the dangers, the threats, the negative. That's more functionally valuable. Now, in today's world, we don't have, unless you're sort of in a war zone or something, most of us listen to this, you don't have day-to-day survival concerns, but our brain is still designed that way, which is why we do it. Now, when you get awareness of how these understanding works, how the brain works, like that's why, again, I started neuroscience of brain for healing my own stuff around the war. Now you can say, all right, this is the reality. This is how it works. Got it. Now what can I do with it? Now I don't have to demonize it. And that's kind of awareness and acceptance is the phase one, because often what happens is we experience a thing and we view it as bad. So even emotions, for example, right? We hear it and we say this is a bad emotion. Take post-traumatic stress disorder. I was labeled with that diagnosis. But as I was researching, right, I found out that what I experienced, like for example, when I came back from war, I was very jumpy with loud noises. And I was told this is a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. But I spent 7 months in a war zone where loud noises meant death.
Yep.
It's not a disorder to be hypervigilant. It's a normal human response to what I experienced. But by labeling it a disorder, I now ascribe that to my identity. I think there's something wrong with me, which creates this downward spiral, and it becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead, you can reframe that. So there was a researcher called Dr. Martin Seligman. He went to West Point and he asked the cadets, how many of you have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder? And something was like 95% raised their hand. He then asked them, how many of you have heard of post-traumatic growth? Less than 5% raised their hand. So we have created a self-fulfilling prophecy in our world that trauma equals disorder. It does not have to. So simply by becoming aware that, all right, I'm jumpy with loud noises, that was an objective truth. I didn't choose that response because my brain had been trained, as you said, the patterns, right?
Yep.
But because I spent 7 months in a war zone. So now I'm accepting it and saying, okay, post traumatic stress does not mean post traumatic stress disorder. Those are two different things. But I'm going to take my post traumatic stress, pause, acknowledge it, be with it, notice it. And then I don't have to let it define me. I don't have to let it shape my identity. So that is why the first step is just building that space between the emotion, the experience of life, and who you choose to be outside of that. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Yep.
In that space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Hmm.
That space is your destiny. Another way to look at it, and I talk about this in Fearvana, is Buddha called it the two darts of suffering. So the first dart is the one we don't control. So right now, for example, you and me are talking. Somebody comes into this room with a gun. I'm going to feel fear. I'm not choosing to feel fear. My brain has seen a stimuli. My brain it's going to experience fear. That's the first dart, right? Don't get caught up in, is the first dart the guy with the gun, or is my brain feeling fear? The first dart is essentially the things outside of our control. The second dart is what we do with it. And that's the unnecessary suffering we all experience. That's when people go through the fear, the anxiety, and then they say, oh, what's wrong with me? I shouldn't feel this way. I should, like, they demonize themselves. They demonize the emotion. They beat themselves up. Like, I worked with a client who would get anxiety every time he sat on a computer to write.
Hmm.
He was writing a book and he'd get massive anxiety, like physiological, sweat on his palms, nerves. And then he
Yep.
would say to himself, what's wrong with me? I'm a piece of shit. Why am I feeling like that dialogue, right? That
Yep.
self-dialogue,
Yep.
what I call the downward spiral of second dart syndrome. So to start, it's essential to practice mastering that awareness. And it's as simple as you can set an alarm on your phone to beep every hour, and then you pause. What am I feeling right now? Got it. I'm feeling, neuroscience has even shown that when you label an emotion, it actually reduces activity in the emotional parts of the brain and increases activity in the part of the brain related to focus and awareness, the prefrontal cortex. So essentially, you're creating that space. That's how you train to be still in the face of a storm. You practice being in a storm, and then I was actually in a very literal sense doing this 2 winters ago. I was in Vermont, and I would go out into the frozen water in the middle of a storm, and while water is like hammering me, the whitecaps, the cold, and I would say, "Be the eye of the storm, be the eye of the storm." So in a
Hmm.
very panic-inducing environment, can I stay still? You don't
Yep.
have to go to that extreme. You can do this in a normal setting, but the point is like mastering that ability at first in just even calm circumstances to understand what am I experiencing in this moment so you're not a slave to it. Now
Hmm.
you can create a space to it. Then, from there, what do I want to do with it? It's about like channeling your stuff into what I call your worthy struggle. Your worthy struggle is your path. It doesn't have to be skiing across Antarctica. It could be raising a child, playing the guitar, playing basketball, writing a book, whatever it may be, getting clarity on what that is for each individual. I mean, like research has shown the two things that lead to happiness and fulfillment is connection. So having people, partner, family, friends, whatever, all that, and your purpose, your meaning, what I call your worthy struggle. And I use that term very consciously because anything worthwhile pursuing will be a struggle,
Yep.
right? But struggle is not bad. I mean, I think passion for what you do is great, but sometimes I don't like that word follow your passion because especially to younger crowds, it conveys this image that if you love what you do, it'll never be a work, you'll never work a day in your life, or it'll all be sunshine and rainbows if you love what you do. And that's not the case.
Yep.
I love what I do, but there are many days it really fucking sucks and it's very hard, So as you know, man. So
Yep.
that's why I call it the worthy struggle. So once you become master that, and this is a lifelong journey of constant mastery. You don't do it once and it stops. You're constantly practicing that, and then you're channeling it to your worthy struggle. And that means clarity over what that worthy struggle is, and then playing in the arena, going into your respective arena. That is the only way you will develop true wisdom and knowledge and inner knowledge from the self. Like you can listen to a podcast, you can read a book, and all those things are great. They can provide sparks, they can provide insights, they can provide awareness, because to give you understandings of what you don't know.
Hmm.
But to get that wisdom, you have to step into your arena,
Yep.
whatever that arena is. And in that battlefield is how you develop You cultivate self-belief, you cultivate strength, you cultivate confidence, you cultivate that iron will to keep moving forward. And you don't even have to believe in yourself when you start. I always say belief is built on the battlefield. You
Hmm.
don't have to believe in yourself. I also don't like this whole notion in personal development about quote unquote overcoming your limiting beliefs. I say fuck your limiting beliefs. Just go to war and you will come out something on the other end of that, like in the internal war.
Yep.
Do some hard shit. Push yourself. Then you become stronger. As I said, man, I was the scaredest person you can imagine. I was terrified of fucking everything. The person that you see today has been built as a result of going into the arena multiple times over and over again to build that self belief. And
Man.
then from there, it's the continuous journey of obsession and mastery over your craft, mind, body, spirit, and craft, the four things you can train, and once you know your path, then obsessively pursuing it. And that's how you truly create the thing we want most in life, whatever words you want to use: bliss, fulfillment, as Joseph Campbell would call it, the rapture of feeling alive.
Mm.
It's finding your tribe and pursuing your meaning at the highest level with obsessiveness and just inner fire.
Do you think the anxiety, depression, despair we're seeing nowadays more than ever is the gap between someone being off connection and purpose and knowing where they should be, and seeing that gap creates these feelings of negative thoughts, depression, and despair?
100%. Yeah, I think one big part of it is the lack of, like, because now it's a psychologist called the paradox of choice. The more choices which we have, which we today we have more than ever,
Mm.
the more confused we become as to what our path is. And it's very easy. I mean, even as an adult who is self-aware, it's very easy to get caught up in saying that this is the thing I need because the world tells me I need this,
Yeah.
right? And so imagine a young kid, you're told a million times this is the thing you need, and you're not actually discovering that. So we're lost for one. We obviously live in a world that is feeding not actual connection with our phone, the social media. I mean, we all kind of know that, but it's very true. Like we're more disconnected than ever, not connected to self, not connected to earth, not connected to each other, not connected to whatever our own individual version of God may be, that we are inevitably then more lost, more depressed. So I think it's a world that feeds also instant gratification. So instead of cultivating like earned dopamine, as I think Andrew Huberman calls it, earned dopamine is I went to war with myself and won, and I feel the rewards of that versus getting a quick dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's like shooting up the drug, getting the drink, watch it, getting the little social media like or whatever. That's not earned dopamine. So we
Yeah.
live in a world that's why I truly empathize with kids today. I'm so glad I grew up in a world without that shit,
Hmm.
because you're growing up in a world where you don't have. I mean, kids are not, they're sort of to some degree slaves of their reality. We all are when we're born. We're cultivated by the world that makes us.
Yeah.
And so when you're born with all this shit around you, and parents, no fault of a parent if you do. I'm not a parent, so I can only imagine how hard it is. But I know a lot of parents will use iPads and iPhones as babysitters.
Yeah.
And I get it because parenting is hard. I was a fucking nightmare of a child. I can empathize with my mom for sure, but that's not doing favors to your kid, and parents also don't want their kids to suffer. I get it. Why would you want your kid to suffer? But you're not helping them. Like I have tons of family that I've seen, extended family in India, especially like wealthy. India is notorious for being overprotective. Indian parents, it's
Mm.
kind of a stereotype, but there's a degree of truth to it. And I've seen it. And now I've seen these younger cousins of mine who grew up overprotected like you would not believe. Now they have no resilience. No resilience. The smallest thing happens in life, they break.
Yeah.
Why do you think this? How do you build it, right? You learn to fall so you get back up. You have to let your kids fall. You have to let your kids suffer a little bit. And you're doing it in a controlled environment. I'm not saying push them into a war zone, obviously, but
Hmm.
you're doing an environment where they have the safety net of you being around them. So let them know they're loved, but let them fall so they know how to get back up.
Yeah.
You know, let them, and that's another thing is also for parents is like not like allowing them to feel what they feel. A lot of parents do this from a place of love, but they'll say, don't worry, don't be scared, don't stress out, don't do this. Instead of saying, got it, hey, you're feeling this way. Why do you think that is? What's happening?
Let's
Talk to them.
unpack it.
Let them feel what they feel and not demonize it. The faster you build that emotional intelligence of saying, I can feel fear and it's okay. And like people will say, don't be scared all the time. I've heard countless people say, don't be scared of failure. I think that's useless advice. Failure is scary. I'm fucking terrified of failing in every way, from the extreme end of death or just failing, not succeeding on my mission. It's scary. But when you reframe that, that's fuel. Like being
Mm.
scared of failure is what has me push harder in my training,
Yeah.
you know? So let from a young age, let people build that get them off this crap like the phones and the stuff like that. So they're actually in the arena. They're building real connection, going out there, connecting with human beings, and doing hard things. So they find their path, their worthy struggle, instead of chasing unearned dopamine.
Man, it's so interesting. When you were talking, I was thinking about, well, I have two young daughters, and so
Mm,
we navigate this stuff on the daily. But the thing that caught my attention the most was the worst I've ever felt in my life has been when I chased what the world was telling me to chase, and I
mm,
got it. And I realized that I got something that I really didn't want. And it's a
mm.
terrible, awful feeling because society, your family, the world, your country is telling you to do things
Yeah.
mostly for materialism or abundance. And so you do what they say and you get everything they told you, and you're just empty inside. And so not only are you empty, but you're like devastated because you did everything you thought you were supposed to. And it's a terrible feeling.
Oh, I bet, brother. Yeah.
So it's interesting to, you really have to step away and get clarity on that so that you don't chase the wrong path.
Mm. This is why, I mean, like tribal cultures have rites of passage, right? I think doing like something like that, where you're getting a space for real solitude and suffering, it
Mm.
allows you to be within. I mean, even Carl Jung said people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that could not be more evident. We do everything we possibly can to distract ourselves from ourselves. And to some degree, even the positive things. Like people will work out or work on their thing because they just need to escape from being with themselves.
Mm.
But I think it's so important to cultivate that from a young age with kids. Let them be within. And that's how you can start getting that internal compass on point, right? To find what your true north is, because everybody's true north is different.
Hmm.
But if you don't ever get the space to actually be still within, you'll never find what that is.
Yeah. In that space, if you're not used to it and you haven't practiced it as an adult for sure, it feels so uncomfortable and awkward. Like that solitude, it'll freak you out at first.
Yeah. And it will. And I can't stress this enough. Like, it's not meant to be that. I mean, people hear the things that I do, and I can't tell you how many talks I've been to where people are like, "How are you so fearless?" And I cannot stress enough that I'm not fearless. Every time I went into the darkness retreat, it's fucking terrifying to sit in a dark room all day, every day. But that's the thing. Like, it will be uncomfortable, especially if you're new to it. But you have to ride that out. You have to ride that out to move through and to find peace. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you're gonna stay in that sort of that quiet desperation. And either way in life, you're going to suffer. No matter what, you're going to suffer. So the question is, which suffering do you want to endure? I think the suffering of actually knowing your path and pursuing it obsessively is a far better suffering than staying in that quiet desperation of never actually confronting yourself within, getting clarity on your North Star and your true north, and moving on that path, because you'll just be miserable your whole life if you don't.
Man, that's so good. Let's close on that one, man, because that is powerful words of wisdom. I think that,
Brother.
everyone taking away, you're going to suffer no matter what. And I do want to be respectful of your time. But that's such a powerful note to close on, is like choose your suffering, because it's going to happen no matter which direction you go.
I always like to say, if you don't seek out a worthy struggle, struggle will find you anyway. So the
Hmm.
question to ask ultimately is not which passion do I want to follow, but which struggle I'm willing to endure.
Yeah.
And then you can decide. And I actually have people write this down. Like, any crossroads in life, there'll be a struggle. Do I want to stay single? Do I want to stay married? Do I want to build this business or work in this corporate job? Do I want to ski across Antarctica or not? Whatever the thing is, do I want to write this book or not? You're going to struggle. So get clear. Okay, here's this path A has this rewards, this struggle. Path B has this rewards, this struggle. And you're not going to rise to the level of rewards you want, to the desires you seek. You're going to fall to the level of struggle you're willing to endure.
Mm.
So ask yourself, once you get clear on that, which struggle am I willing to endure? And then now you're making a choice. And if you choose to stay in the suck, to not pursue your struggle, you're making that choice. And there's consequences to every choice, to every choice.
Yeah.
But choosing consciously is what like I want for people. So you're choosing it consciously and not just being a slave to external programming.
Hmm. Yeah. And start that rewiring of your brain by,
Exactly.
getting in some quiet spaces.
Absolutely.
Man, thank
Yeah.
you so much. Akshay, that's amazing. We
Thank you for
appreciate
having me,
you.
brother.
We'll
Likewise.
we're proud of you. We'll be following that journey.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So awesome.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. What a powerful conversation with Akshay. Man, there is a lot to unpack on that episode. He starts with that 10-day solitude retreat, just sitting alone in a dark room with his own thoughts. Not even any light coming into that room is insane. And his preparation for this expedition was fascinating as well. Huge takeaways for all listeners from that show. The takeaways I'm going to apply to my life for sure immediately are where he closed out the episode with you have to choose your struggle. And looking at life and all the decisions we make through that lens is so incredibly helpful, because no matter what path we take, we are going to struggle. So you hear that analogy all the time. You can eat all the cake, you can eat all the ice cream, but you're going to struggle with obesity. Or you can choose that struggle on the front end, make good decisions, work out. The workout becomes your struggle, not the obesity. So choose your struggle in every decision. And he hammered that point. To make those decisions well, we have to get in some quiet spaces alone with our own thoughts so that we have clarity around those decisions. Don't let these technology devices distract you every second, every minute of every day, because if you do, you're not going to have that clarity to make the right decision, to choose your struggle, to put your life on that right path. And that was a powerful episode full of so much gold. I hope you guys loved it as much as I did. If you want to learn more about Akshay, you can check him out on Instagram at Fearvana. We'll be following his journey as it comes up as he approaches that Antarctica expedition. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you guys next week. Make sure to check out the Mountain Tough YouTube and stay dangerous. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.